When Intel launched their Lunar Lake laptops, one of the big things that stood out was just how powerful and energy efficient the GPUs were. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, we wanted to see some kind of gaming handheld that would take advantage of that chip because it just seemed so promising. This is the first one on the market, the MSI Claw 8 AI. It's a terribly long name. Now, before I begin, I need to preface this video with just a thought. Last year, I did a video on the first MSI Claw, the first generation one, and I did a video on the early hardware. I wasn't allowed to benchmark it or test it, and I felt like I got burned because when the device actually launched, the performance was poor, the battery life wasn't great, and I felt like MSI had overhyped what the product would be able to do, mostly because of the chip. So this time around, I've had this device for over a month, and I purposefully waited until the drivers came out so I could test it properly and talk about the performance. And this time, I think there is something worthy of a video. Okay. This device outperforms the ROG Ally X and other Z1 Extreme devices on most gaming titles. I'd say that the Intel 258V is just a better chip overall for handheld gaming. Now, it's still very early on in the launch of this product, so some titles don't work perfectly, but you can already tell that it's a solid performer and it can only get better over time. Now, in terms of image upscaling tech, so Intel has XeSS, AMD has their FSR tech. I much prefer Intel's iteration of this kind of technology, especially on handhelds. Like, your face is right for the screen, you're holding these things close, and when you have any kind of artifacting from AMD's FSR, which is just more noticeable on AMD's version of it, it just takes away from the experience. So I like that the Intel version is so good, but there's not a ton of games that support it still. So it's only like 200 plus titles on Steam. I just think that grows over time. One thing to keep in mind though, that AMD chip, that Z1 Extreme that's in here, is a pretty old chip. It came out in like the spring of 2023, so it's almost 2 years old. So I'm not surprised that a new Intel chip can outperform it. If anything, I'm surprised it took that long, but this is the benchmark. That Z1 Extreme is the chip that's in all of the kind of top performing Windows handhelds right now. There are other AMD chips like the HX370, but those aren't particularly energy efficient, and I don't think many companies will be using it for handhelds. Now, the battery life on the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus is quite good. It's running an 80 watt-hour battery, so it's fairly big, and because you can easily set the TDP in settings, it's very consistent and predictable in terms of battery life. Also, fan noise is very quiet. It is running a very energy efficient chip, so it's relatively easy to cool it silently. But also the idle power draw is way better than the first generation of the MSI Claw. And I think having a lower power consumption at that idle state is a really important characteristic of just having a good portable gaming experience. Now, this device comes in two screen sizes. There's a 7-inch model, which looks very similar in terms of like the hardware aesthetics to last year's model, and then this new 8-inch model that does have a bigger screen and also the larger 80 watt-hour battery. Now, when you hold this thing, the first time I pulled it out of the box, it is definitely bigger and heavier than the 7-inch Claw, but I don't find it uncomfortable to hold or tiring to hold it even after an extended period of time. This is actually a very ergonomic device to hold. I also prefer this device in terms of the ergos over the ROG Ally X. This always felt a little bit flat and just not as comfortable to me, but still the king of ergonomics is the Steam Deck. This, I don't know why, I just love the way this thing holds. Like the kind of curved grip on the back just gives it really nice ergonomics in comparison. But this, I like it. It feels nice. There's a micro SD as well as two Thunderbolt 4 ports up top if you want to connect to an external GPU. But there's three kind of hardware features I want to talk about. The first is the display. So this is an 8-inch display, 120 hertz, variable refresh rate. It is an IPS panel, it's not OLED, but I do like the resolution. It's 1200p, and at first when I saw that it was a higher resolution screen, I was like, I typically prefer lower resolution screens on handhelds, but because it can handle it with the more powerful GPU, I'm happy with that resolution. The second thing I want to talk about though are the controls. So the sticks and the D-pad. And both of these components I did not like out of the box. I thought that the sticks were too loose and just not springy enough. I just felt like there just wasn't enough resistance as you moved it around. And I also didn't like the D-pad in terms of how it felt. Now, over time, over this month, because I've been using this so much, I've grown to really like the sticks. I think you just adapt to the kind of resistance that you're given, and your aim just adapts and your movement just gets used to it. I'm good with the sticks. But the D-pad, over the month, I've grown to dislike it more and more. And I think anyone who plays games, like let's say you play Street Fighter and you're doing quarter circles or half circles, your thumb just gets shredded on this D-pad. And I think it's because the ridges on this thing are so high. I don't know why they made it like this. Like maybe the MSI engineers just don't play a lot of fighting games, but this does not feel good to me. And I'm actually surprised it hurts as much as it does, even after using it for a month. I just never got used to it. The third thing I want to talk about are the speakers. These sound awesome. I think these are the best sounding speakers on any gaming handheld right now. They sound great, good volume as well. Now, the price. So this model, the 8-inch model, starts at $899, a $900 gaming handheld. It is equipped with 32 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of storage, but that is just a crazy expensive price point. So I think the reason why it feels so expensive is that at this point in time, a lot of the competitors have dropped down in pricing, like they're a little bit older, so you can get like $600 or even $550 devices that are so good. So you have a $900 device that is better performing and it's got a ton of RAM, but it's still $900. So here's my take. I think the device is great, and I think that it will likely be one of the better performing Windows handhelds we have available on the market. But I would wait on this thing for that price to come down. I feel like there's no way that they'll be able to readily sell this thing at that price point, and because MSI is MSI, they'll drop the price down, and at that point, I think this becomes a more palatable purchase. But there you have it. That's the new MSI Claw 8 AI Plus.